Hour 2, 3-hour show today. Vikings programming at 6, followed by Minnesota Wild hockey. All that coming up in the fan. Courtney Cronin is scheduled to check in from Chicago, Illinois at about 5:30 this afternoon. Inbox in about a little less than 30 minutes. Email guardsjg@kfan.com. How's the mailbag load right now?
In pretty good shape.
Good.
But we always try to take good to great. And we usually do take good to great. So there's a little bit of room. We might have some room for some extras, and even during the segment.
How good is the Ohio State defensive line? Do we know?
It is a tad below Michigan.
Okay.
But not
horribly
much further down.
Okay.
Early in the season, it was seen there were a lot of stuff. There's 72 outlets that cover the Buckeyes, so there's always a podcast or some type of content. It was seen as a little bit of a disappointment. They didn't think they played very well in the Oregon game, which is their loss out there.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, when the Gophers were at UCLA, so mid-October. They didn't play super well there, but their front four will all be drafted probably first 2 days. So not as good as Michigan, who has, I think, the top two defensive linemen, but it's in that ballpark. So their line is good. Their secondary also is very good. The safeties, I think, are better than the corners, but they're going to be super talented. So it's an unbelievable matchup because Indiana, you would probably know this, but Indiana has the most efficient offense in the country by all the metrics. Most explosive plays, biggest stuff. QB's been good.
Until Michigan.
RPO stuff, and that was the one game that they really struggled with. The only game that they didn't score 31, right?
Correct.
And so that's why it's an interesting matchup because it is strength on strength a little bit because Ohio State, by most metrics, has a top 5-ish defense, and they should. I mean, it's Ohio State. That's what you expect. So it should be interesting, but they're good. I'm not going to tell you there's a weakness there. Right. They got a couple of guys in the line. The 4 guys are going to get drafted probably in the first 2 days of April's draft.
Well, I actually think a lot of it the story will be told on whether the Indiana defensive front, which is a good one, can put pressure on. Because I assume with the skill Ohio State has, if you don't, you're going to have problems. But they've had a good pass rush this season. So that will be
and Ohio State's offensive line, I don't think as highly touted. Okay. And they've gotten better the last 2 weeks, but their opponents were Purdue and Northwestern. So there's a little bit of paper tiger there. The numbers look better for the offensive linemen from what I've read the last couple of weeks, but that's to be expected when you factor in the opponents that they played.
I mentioned earlier that I had one of those proud father-daughter moments the other day when Giovanni and I watched to its conclusion the 1960 epic horror classic Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock motion picture that is still hailed by movie critics as one of the best horror films of all time. And it was a smashing success largely because she liked it. And you never know with kids how that's going to go. She genuinely seemed to get into the thread of the story and the I guess you could say the conclusion of the story, etc. And some people, the question was, where do we go from here? I think you kind of asked that question. And a couple folks mentioned, well, how about The Birds, another Hitchcock film? And it's funny that people bring that up because Giovanni's already seen The Birds. And she kind of laughed at it. She was not terrified. She did not find it particularly oh my God. And I don't know if that's a sign of, the difference in terms of special effects that kids now see compared to then, where it seems kind of ham-handed. It didn't at the time because that's all you had, right? And there was, I think, again, a better willingness to suspend belief. But, she was not. And I wouldn't call The Birds is a different kind of horror film, I guess it is, but it's, I would not call it anywhere near as psychologically brilliant, obviously, as Psycho. And then a couple people said, Silence of the Lambs. She's already seen Silence of the Lambs.
I guess there's nothing left.
Come
I guess
on,
Psycho was the final one.
And I don't know why Psycho was I think it was more the final one because it was in black and white, and she has tended to dismiss most of those films, and she had dismissed Birds. The Birds that was in color, but it's from that same period, one could say. And so part of the reason I think I hesitated is I didn't want to be let down. I didn't want her to see Psycho.
Never meet your heroes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is going to bum me out if she says, Dad, what's the big deal? And I don't think she was lying, because I think it was pretty spontaneous. Like I said, when she looks over at me and says, this is getting good. And that, like I said, that's all you can hope for in a situation like that. Silence of the Lambs, I think she liked.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's way past Silence of the Lambs.
Quick follow-up on
Fava Beans guy to you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Quick follow-up from last night. Because like you said, you don't think she was just humoring you.
No, yeah, I don't think.
Has she asked you for any big purchases today, now that she's got you in the palm of her hand? Well, I guess that's every day.
I was going to say, but even
what's
for
the
distinction?
Even for her, she asked you for something that,
no.
Were you asleep at the wheel a little bit today when she asked you for something that she'd been waiting for? Then I'd be, that does sound a little sus, as the kids would say. My favorite Giovanni movie bit is how she's completely bored with Jaws.
Yeah,
which
she laughed at it.
Yeah, where you thought, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah,
and
she laughed at it.
I don't even think, I'm guessing I could handle Jaws, but I have no interest in watching it, especially because I have seen the beach scene where the mom's looking for her son. I have seen that one, and that bothers me. But that's my favorite Giovanni story, is that you sat her down to watch that, and that was like 10 years ago.
She was bored with it. Yeah, she was bored with it.
It did nothing for her.
Yeah, I don't think she was 3. She might have been 5.
Yeah, it didn't move her at all.
No, it didn't. It didn't move the needle. It didn't terrify her. It didn't creep her out. It didn't do any of those things. A couple of people bring up North by Northwest. That's a whole different Hitchcock category. That's my favorite Hitchcock film. That's really not. I think she'll like that kind of movie eventually, but I think she needs a little bit more of a horror component still to it. And, North by Northwest is more, I guess you could say, suspense, right, than kind of anything else.
Yeah.
Now, the film I do want to watch with her, which I never thought about watching before, which I think now she would get into, is the original The Fugitive, the movie, with Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
It's a great adventure film. It's old, it's dated now in terms of it's been a while, but I have a hunch.
That's a classic,
It's a classic movie.
That's a great one.
With such an unbelievable cast.
Richard Kimball.
As well, for sure.
We had Big Ten Media Days at that Chicago Hilton a lot.
Oh, did you really?
The one on Michigan Avenue.
Yeah.
So you'd walk into the ballroom and you'd go, this is where Harrison Ford walked in to his old friend and figured out how it all happened.
A couple people were asking about The Exorcist. And I said, here's how we've handled The Exorcist. The original one, there's some graphic aspects to it that I'm not willing to go there yet with Giovanni, okay? So we've left that one out. But we have watched Exorcist 3 together with George C. Scott because it doesn't have that same sort of graphic stuff. It's gory. So we're on the Exorcist train, but we've kind of held out on the original, which is obviously the best film. But let's take a pause here, and we'll get to a couple more texts. I got a couple of other items I want to run by you. One of them, at least, Vikings related. And then we'll prepare for the inbox at 4:30. And after Top 5 at 5, sometime around 5:30, we expect a call from Courtney Cronin. What is both NBC, I believe, and CBS, maybe ABC as well, but certainly the first two, have primetime true crime shows that have been going on for years that are still, I think, very popular.
Like Dateline, 48 Hours.
Dateline is NBC, right?
Yep.
48 Hours is CBS.
Yep.
ABC would be Dateline? No, that's NBC.
No, they do have something. What's it called?
They have something. Yeah. So these, I think, are still very, very popular shows. I've got the next one that I'm sure they're all competing or grappling over.
2020.
2020 is that's that one. I think the NBC one's the most successful, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Seems like it.
I got their next case. I don't know if you saw this. The story appeared in the New York Times, but it's fascinating. This goes back to a 1981 beating, a fatal beating, of a steel worker in my neck of the woods, Northwest Indiana, where I came from originally. And the story, or I guess you could say the murder, has remained unsolved, or did remain unsolved, for so long that the son of the original detective on the case started reinvestigating it in 2018 and apparently has helped to solve it.
Okay.
I mean, how good a hook is that for Dateline? Are you kidding me?
It's perfect. They're probably on it.
They probably have already done it, and I don't even know it. This is a New York Times story, as I mentioned. So, November 3, 1981, a guy named Thurston, Gregory Thurston. No, excuse me. That's the guy who's arrested. Let me get to the individual who was murdered. John Blaylock Sr. He was killed at the age of 51 in his apartment in Griffith, Indiana. Okay? And as the story goes, two worried steelworkers who worked with Mr. Blaylock went to his building on a Tuesday afternoon because he didn't show up for his shifts the previous 2 days. Sunday newspaper still outside his apartment door. Yes, boys and girls, people used to get the Sunday paper delivered to their doorstep at their homes. Some people did it 7 days a week. Door was locked. They wait while two building employees use a master key to get inside. Employees find Mr. Blaylock, a father of three, lying face down on the floor of his bedroom in a pool of blood. Detectives soon arrives. They find hair and body tissue embedded in the shards of a pottery piece. There's a broken digital clock which reads 2:19 at his feet, a watch that stopped at 2:15 and 43 seconds. The date, November 1, 1981. They rule the killing a homicide, and they say he died from a skull fracture due to blunt force trauma. Now, a detective at the time, last name was Mowry, Detective Mowry, John Mowry Sr. of the Griffith Police Department. He's assigned to the case. He learns Blaylock was a regular at a nearby bar, had last been seen there in the early hours of Saturday, November 1. One of the workers of the bar say that she had seen him with a younger man whom she had not seen before. They conducted a bunch of interviews. They did a lot of running down leads, but they couldn't put any identity to the evidence, or they couldn't really get to a legitimate suspect. So Detective Mowry Sr. retires in 1994 after 25 years on the job. Case is unsolved as he retires. His son joins the department 4 years later. And like a lot of police departments, in recent years, apparently the Griffith Police Department started revisiting open homicide cases. They call them in the business, in the world of Harry Bosch, they call them cold cases.
Cold cases.
And so Detective Mowry Jr. opens this one shoebox full of stuff, and it's this Blaylock case that my dad worked on. So he decides, all right, I'm going to take a fresh look at this thing. He re-interviews the detectives who worked on the case, presumably including his father. And he learned that the investigators back then believed that the suspect had been cut and had bled during the attack. Now, in 81, there were limits with what blood evidence could show. DNA was not a part of police work in 81, nor was something called CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Index System, an FBI database of DNA profiles from biological evidence found at crime scenes. So they talk about that. Few people they interviewed back then that would have been the last people to see Blaylock alive, as well as where he was likely to spend time in the days leading up to his crime. They conclude the blood in his bathroom could not have belonged to Mr. Blaylock because the victim most likely would not have been able to make it that far from where he had been attacked. So Mowry Jr. sends a sample of the blood, this other blood, to the Indiana State Police. They develop a DNA profile in 2018. No matches turn up with this CODIS system, CODIS. But in 2022, he takes another shot at it. He sends the DNA profile to something called Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia company whose services include novel DNA-based forensics. Been used in recent years to solve a bunch of other cases, including one of your favorites, the Golden State Killer case. Investigators are revisiting hundreds of unsolved crimes using these forensics. And it was Paragon's advanced analysis in the fall of 2022 that gave the Griffith case its first major league lead in 41 years. They winnow the suspects to 3 men, all from the same family, the Thurston family, and all had lived in the Griffith area at the time of the crime, apparently, according to the affidavit. One of the men died shortly thereafter, but not before Junior Mowry got a hair sample that eliminated him as a suspect. So that leaves Gregory Thurston and his brother. The police in Burnham, Illinois, a town of about 4,000 residents between Chicago and the Indiana border, they pull Mr. Thurston's brother over in May of last year. He tosses a cigarette butt out the window of his vehicle. An officer collects it, sent to the Indiana State Lab, which eliminated him as a possible suspect. So now the lab has concluded that it was highly likely, or 520,000 times more likely, that the DNA from the blood in the bathroom was from the remaining Thurston, Gregory Thurston. He's been arrested in Eugene, Oregon, brought to Indiana this month to face charges. Now, where the case goes from here, I absolutely have no idea. Is this enough DNA evidence to say it can't be anybody else, or would a Joe Friedberg, class of an attorney, defense attorney, say, not so fast, my friend? But the twists and turns of this one are just fascinating to me. How they got to where they did, how you revisit a case, the father-son angle. You can't beat a father-son angle in the same case, can you?
That's awesome.
It's unbelievable. And now there may be ultimately justice in this particular case.
We're seeing it more and more because of the advances. Cold cases getting another crack, taking another look at it.
But are they always right? That's what I want to know. Are they always right? Is it as slam dunk as we have been led to believe on all these TV shows?
Probably not, as we've been led to believe on TV, but pretty close, I think.
Yeah.
Because that evidence is tough to get around.
Yeah.
I just love the cigarette grabbing.
Yeah, now that's right out of the.
It is, yes.
The TV shows too, is it not?
And how they, they'll do that, and they'll give them a cup for water, and then they'll keep the cup. Keep the cup. I mean, all the entrapments and all those things. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, that in fact, here's a callback to Silence of the Lambs. A key part of that film is there's a huge reward for Hannibal Lecter, and an Italian detective who's kind of down on his luck. He thinks he's found him. He wants the reward. He doesn't care necessarily about bringing him to justice. He wants the reward is what he wants.
He's down on his luck.
So his job is, I got to get fingerprint or DNA. But Lecter ain't no dummy. Lecter, every time he's close to getting it, like a glass of wine that he's left at a restaurant table, guess what Lecter does? They got a napkin out, takes care of the glass. He was always one step ahead of him. And if you've seen the film, that detective pays a very, very Hannibal Lecter-like heavy price for his decision to go outside the system rather than just to let the cops arrest him and bring him properly to justice. Speaking of properly to justice, there's always justice from our listeners. They tend to exact very precise and sometimes vicious justice during the inbox segment, and that's what's coming up. Your emails, Guardsy has been collecting them, jg@kfan.com. We'll get to Dr. Dan's inbox, and then about an hour from now, prepare for Courtney Cronin. Stay tuned.
Time now for the Vikings Report on the Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Viking safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite.
For interrupting you there, in my never-ending effort to expand my ginger ale experience, I started with Canada Dry. Today I thought, let's try Schweppes to compare.
Mixing it up, huh? Mini can, same one?
Mini can size. I think the Canada Dry ginger ale tasted better to me. Now, I don't know. There may be some great ginger ale minds out there to say neither is the best, Dan. Here's what you need to go to.
Oh, sure.
My guess is KOC probably has in his fridge.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That's
just
sick.
The best, most exotic form of ginger ale out there that has to be imported from like Czechoslovakia.
He found it in San Diego.
That's it, yes.
When he was going to school there.
That's it. So,
why ask why? Try Canada Dry.
Well, I like that.
Not quite what the Bud Dry was.
No, but decent.
What was Bud Dry about? It was a beer, obviously. It was Bud, but what was the dry?
I'm not a great beer mind. I wouldn't even
someone's
know.
going to have to, Bradshaw
I'm
Bryan,
familiar with
KFAN
dry
text line.
wines. Never liked them. But, I don't know how dry beer works.
Why ask why? Try Bud Dry.
You would have a better chance to know that than me.
I would, and that commercial was probably 30 years ago, and I still remember it. Shows you how effective advertising can be.
For the record, and I love our listeners because they always want to, hold our feet to the fire. I am aware that Hannibal Lecter has appeared in more than one movie. Silence of the Lambs was the big one. The scene I just described is from a movie, Hannibal. The callback part was it's the same villain. That's the point. So, again, I appreciate how literal people want to be, but I think most people understood that if we were at the start talking about Silence of the Lambs, it's because that was the movie in which Hannibal Lecter made it big, obviously, with Anthony Hopkins, but he's the link to these other films. It doesn't even really matter what the names of those movies are, but I appreciate the diligence and the vigilance from folks out there. We'll save a couple of other interesting texts that have indeed come in. One other, there's another horror film idea that might be the best suggestion, but it is in the classification of being so unrelentingly grim that I will not be the one to present it to my daughter. She may end up seeing it, eventually. She's going to grow up. She's going to make her own choices. But it's not a film that I cannot sit down and have a bonding experience, I don't think, over that particular movie. Anyway, you want to start the inbox?
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Even I have my limits, I guess what I'm trying to say, which is, I know, hard to believe.
Every Thursday, right around 4:30, JG at KFAN.com. I need to start with a preemptive apology because we are going to leave a lot on the cutting room floor today.
I'm sorry.
No, it's nobody's fault. This happens from time to time. Late surge of outstanding letters, and I'll couple the apology with I'm not sure how we're going to get through all of the M. Gates letters.
All right.
I might try to do a medley or a montage at the end, but we should almost have a second segment for M. Gates letters. It seems like there's a thread and a trend in Dr. Dan's inbox this week. But let's start with this. Dear Dr. Dan, it's been so long since our last championship that entire teams have disappeared, only to become relics of sports history. The H. Oilers, M. Expos, H. Whalers, Q. Nordiques, M. North Stars, LA Raiders, S. Chargers, gone. And yet they were alive when we last tasted victory. But the list doesn't stop there. Entire eras have teams have come to life since our drought began. F Panthers, O Senators, T Lightning, C Hurricanes, you get the point. The passage of time is deafening. Since our last triumph, M Tyson still had a shot at being champion. E Holyfield still had his full ear intact. And the B10 conference was actually, get this, Dr. Dan, 10 teams. So, Dr. Dan, how did we get here? Well, S. Darnold joined unlikely greats like J. Hostetler, T. Dilfer, B. Johnson, J. Flacco, N. Foles, and M. Stafford to lead a team to glory. Will this M. Wild team, off to a fiery start, finally break through for the Stanley Cup? Can the M. Timberwolves, showing us glimmers of hope, take the next step and bring home a title? Dr. Dan, we're not asking for miracles, just an end to this painful drought. Yes, I understand for you there's IU football, whose fans have waited far longer for a Big Ten title, but I'm not even sure that qualifies as hope. Can you give us a reason to believe, to keep the faith? M. Minnesota fans.
So,
when you put it like that, it's been a long drought.
It has been a long drought. That, of course, again, so we're talking about on basically the men's side, right?
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. And I think we still, on the men's side, if you do the combined failed championship opportunities, we lap the field of any other market around the country several times, do we not? We've done with this exercise before. I haven't updated the numbers.
We have.
But we're way ahead of whoever the second market happens to be. And you're right. You put it in those terms, it does seem extremely daunting. And we talked yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, about at a time where there's a lot of discussion on coaches on the hot seat in the National Football League. We don't really have anybody on a warm seat at this point other than probably the men's basketball coach. Yet that doesn't mean we're necessarily on the brink on the men's side,
right.
Again, I'm talking about, of breaking through to anything, right? Because it's hard. It isn't that hard, I don't think, to be relevant, or it shouldn't be. But it is very hard to win a title, right? Even if you're good, even if you get on a roll, there's still a decent shot that you're going to finish short, that someone else is going to knock you off. And so we can have the debate about who's closest to a title right now, right? And I think most people would probably still say the Timberwolves, despite a slow start to this season, because they had such a great finish last year. Maybe there's some people who would say Vikings. You heard S. Salisbury say he thinks that they're going to be in the mix, although you also noticed what he added, which was a belief that top plateau, even in the NFC, it's not deep, but he thinks you got to probably put Detroit and Philly there. He doesn't have us, it doesn't sound, on that plateau. So when people say to me over the years, they go, man, you're kind of dark. Your show is awfully negative. And I say, it probably is. I don't deny that
I just watched
can
Psycho
ambulance chase.
with my 14-year-old daughter.
Exactly. But to a certain extent, I'm not sure it makes sense to shoot the messenger, because the facts are the facts when it comes to on the men's side of the table, basically post 1991, right? And you know, how many decades has it been since the Vikings have gotten to the Super Bowl, let alone won it? Well, we know they've never won it. They've never won it.
Never been in my lifetime.
And in your lifetime, they've never even gotten there, correct?
They have not.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters.
This is an interesting one.
Ba-da-ba-da-bee-dee-bee.
Dear Dr. Dan, if I am taken number one in next year's WNBA draft, which I will be, to the Dallas Wings, do you think C. Reeve, and the rest of the WNBA will acknowledge that my presence at a Target Center game actually helped sell out that game? Or do you think I will get to see Clark treatment P. Beckers?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, isn't it?
How will P. Beckers be received? She's pretty good. She's not C. Clark level of fame, but she's pretty good. People forget about her because of the injuries.
Yeah, and they've started their season, I assume. How they do? I know. In fact, their head coach just set the all-time winning record, right, for men and women's coaches.
Did you see all the players that were there?
Was it like ridiculous?
The back row was like behind the bench was like Tarasi, Bird, and Maya Moore. Just like behind Beckers and whoever's on their
anybody
team.
else.
No, but
and
they have them.
Start.
Brianna Stewart. I mean, Fee, obviously.
No, I don't think anybody's going to get the C. Clark treatment. My guess is P. Beckers. Well, part of it is because I don't think she's, from a pop culture standpoint, ascended to the same place. Do you? Not right now. Not yet.
Not yet.
For various reasons. So my guess is there won't be this same sort of reflexive, we got to knock her down, and there have been a lot of great players here, and whatever the case may be. My guess is no, she will not be received with the same scorn and resentment that was built in for C. Clark.
I think she's bitter that the D. Wings won the lottery and not the L. Sparks.
Well, seriously?
Yeah. I don't think anybody wants to go to Dallas.
How bad are they?
They're not very good, but it's also
good
Dallas.
Market.
It's okay.
It's a fine market.
Dallas is fine.
It's a good sports market. I've been there. I know.
It's too big.
Well, too big.
Too big. You never know where you are. Am I in Fort Worth?
Are you intimidated by the Metroplex?
I had to take the train from Fort Worth into, I think, downtown Dallas.
Rent a car.
They had the ice storm.
Oh, that was the ice storm. Yeah, I remember
for the
that.
Super Bowl.
Well, that's unusual. That doesn't happen all that
couldn't
often.
handle that.
Okay. Everybody should move.
Dallas is okay.
All right.
Not much of a downtown vibe.
No, Dallas is not a good downtown town. No.
AJ and I did it too, and we had no idea. It's like, is the Final Four even here?
No, I never liked there was no Dallas downtown vibe.
Yeah.
To speak of. This area around downtown and downtown, for all of its ups and downs over the decades, felt a lot more like a downtown than Dallas did.
Fort Worth, although.
I never spent any time in Fort Worth because I wouldn't wear a cowboy hat.
Fort Worth is cool.
Yeah.
I like Fort Worth.
All right. We're happy for you.
Dear Dr. Dan, do you have a cure for hurt feelings? All I did was breathe life into a failing program here in Minnesota, and I got chased out. But thankfully for me, because I love football so much, football loves me back. And now here I am as the head football coach at Charlotte. When I listen to the radio, all I hear is the tasteless box of mashed potatoes sideline reporter and the aardvark disparaging me, and the guy I replaced taking cheap shots too. What more can I do, T. Brewster?
What's interesting about that, we were having a conversation with Pete Kessler off air, and he noted that T. Brewster is the one coach, maybe the only coach, that G. Mason does not hesitate to savage.
It's true.
He will pile on and pound away. And my theory is, well, it's because he replaced Glenn G. Mason.
I get it.
That was it. And he wants to pile on the guy who fired him and hired G. Mason. Or hired T. Brewster, right? I think that's a lot of it, don't you?
No doubt.
That's maybe like 88% of it. Although, you were gone for this. So, Mace...
I heard it, though. The Arizona State thing?
So
I have no idea what he's talking about.
I think it's false.
Okay.
I think it's a piece of... We got some emails from people opining, and then I looked it up, who think it's video of some actor or player, former player / actor, who before the spring game at Arizona State last year did an extremely obscene pregame speech that got attention.
Okay.
And that G. Mason thinks that's the current head coach at Arizona State, and it's not. Which would be called, I think, in the business, fake news. No, what would he call it?
Fact versus fiction.
Fact versus fiction. In this case, he's, I think, offering up the fiction.
He is.
And he'd rip us for that in a minute.
Just remember, this is a ripe time for scamming senior citizens around the holidays. So just everybody check in on your people.
For the Golden Bachelor?
Let's check in on the Golden Bachelor from time to time. Make sure he's not clicking on any links.
Did you hear that line, too? He failed. You were still around for that.
I was here for that one. That was a good line.
The line about how, no, I failed. I didn't make the cut on Golden Bachelor because they said I looked too young.
It's classic.
God, it's just classic Mace.
When you're that self-absorbed, no wonder you can't figure out if something is fake or not.
That's right.
Time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, let's get right to the point. I need your approval if I'm going to pursue the M Vikings next season. I am a complete disaster in need of a doctor, but I don't necessarily believe in science, and that's why I'm reaching out to you and you alone. If I get your blessing, I will not only be throwing darts to the likes of Jay Jefferson and Jay Addison, but I guarantee a weekly in-person segment with you.
Whoa.
Please, Dr. Dan, you are my only hope. From the darkest of darkness, A. Rogers.
Even you said, when we played around with this subject yesterday, that you would not entertain despite how seductive the storyline is, following the Favre storyline, that you're not falling for it. Is that correct?
Correct. I wouldn't be interested.
Well, neither was S. Salisbury, and there's no bigger A-Rod fan than he is. And he said, I can get seduced by the name, but I don't see it right now. I actually think I'd be more intrigued than either one of you, but I'm still not sure I'd have the cojones to actually do it because there's a part of me that says he's done, that he's pretty close to done. And the problem with him is the eye roll factor's high. And when do we say you can tolerate and accept that? The player's good enough. I'm not sure he's close to good enough to deal with the self-absorption that is now part of the A-Rod experience.
Can he fit into the culture shield?
Well, that goes back to more how hard if the head coach would be fascinated by it.
Right.
Because, he might lose himself in his eyes to say, well, for 1 year, you put off the JJ thing he doesn't go anywhere. You just put it off for 1 year unless he demands a trade at that point.
It's time for Dr. Dan's Inbox.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, it's November, and in Bloomington, the usual scent of Hoosier hysteria is in the air. Only it's different this year. We're undefeated, and we're not talking about the men's basketball team.
No, we're not.
Indiana football, I still can't believe I'm saying this, is winning every game, and we're in uncharted waters over here at the Daily Student. Normally, our playbook is simple, as you know. Start cranking out basketball features in October and let the football season quietly fade away. But C. Signetti's crew won't let that happen. So, Dr. Dan, in these strange football-first times, we come to you, one of IU's wise alum, for guidance. Here are our questions. Number 1, Dr. Dan, who has the coldest stare? The legendary B. Knight or the new contender, C. Signetti?
Oh.
If S. Hartman were still with us, would he call C. Signetti a close personal friend? What's the right way to balance our coverage? Do we have the front page's headlines touting our steamroller of a football team, or do we follow the traditional formula of shifting right to basketball this time of year? And lastly, for the sake of our record books, Dr. Dan, who will lose first this fall? The football team or the basketball team? Thank you, Dr. Dan, for being a beacon of knowledge in this topsy-turvy season. We're listening. ID student.
That's those are all very good questions from ID student. On the stare, it's close. Now, there's recency bias because everybody's on the Signetti bandwagon right now. I think pound for pound, in terms of, intimidating stares, it's still hard to top B. Knight in his prime. Remember, his original nickname was Dragon, and there was a reason for that. So I would still lean that way. But if I were at the ID student, basketball is an afterthought right now. It is. And in fact, there was already some rumblings that there wasn't great belief in M. Woodson. Good but not great enough based on all the money that he was getting and that they were spending. But this is the sort of story Dr. Dan believes you may never get again at Indiana, even if Signetti stays for 20 years, right? There may never be a season quite like this. I know they want to think they're going to stay relevant, and I think they have a chance to with him. But to me, you milk this for all it's worth, and you put basketball in Indiana. I know it sounds sacrilegious on the back page.
It's time for Dr.
One quick one here, and then I'm just going to read some of the M. Gates walk-offs.
All right, perfect.
Oh, we get letters. We get your letters every day.
Dear Dr. Dan, I pride myself on authenticity and genuine nature due to my farm boy upbringing. After 36 years of humbly burning the midnight oil in the bowels of the state capitol in St. Paul, I think I'm facing my own reality check. I found a place away from the Twin Cities that has captured my heart and soul. Nashville. Who would have thought that? I'm considering trading away my Helga horns, my Twin season tickets, and my maroon and gold pom-poms in exchange for a cowboy hat. I just might move out to Redneck Vegas and live out the rest of my years.
He wore it in here yesterday. Did you know that?
Well, Brett sent me a picture.
Okay.
The rest of my years enjoying the bright lights and bars on Broadway. What a great life. What a great state. Tennessee. This is P. Kessler reporting.
Nothing would surprise me in the case of P. Kessler. Nothing.
The funniest part about Kessler is whenever he goes anywhere, he immediately starts looking for houses there.
He does.
He's done it like 9 trips in a row. Palm Springs.
They're never going to move out of St. Paul. They're
agree.
They're going to be there for another 50 years.
It's my favorite, though.
Yeah, it's true. Including, what was the town people said we thought he was moving to when Fox 9
Hamel.
did it? It was Hamel. Yeah, Hamel, Minnesota.
Yeah.
You're right. We actually had several people convinced he was moving to Hamel.
It's never too late.
After appearing in he was supposed to show up for the Fox 9 Town Ball event.
I don't think he did, right?
No, he didn't. He burned it.
Dr. Dan, I'm sad the national media brought up untrue stories about M. Gates. Give the guy a break. That is from M. Chimura, former Packer
Chewy
tight end.
Got all about Chewy. That's a good callback right there.
Dear Dr. Dan, due to some recent changes in the political climate, I currently find myself unemployed. I just read that R. Shaver recently retired. Does that mean there's going to be an opening in the Twin Cities for a high school sports reporter? I do like hanging out at high schools.
Oh, man.
That's from M. Gates. That's vicious. I probably should have ended on that one. Dear Dr. Dan, I quit my job a few days ago anticipating I would get a better one. It didn't exactly work out for me.
No.
Any chance you could fire P. Kessler and hire me as your new political wonk?
Reality check?
I come with vast political experience, believe I could be a valuable asset. I've heard the Power Trip morning show on your station and have come to the conclusion that KFAN does not require background checks, so that's a big plus.
That's a good one.
That one from M. Gates. And let's see, are there any more M. Gates ones?
Go ahead and blow it out. If you got a couple more, I'm fine.
Dear Dr. Dan, today I find myself out of work looking for a job. Many people say I'm intelligent, a real go-getter who doesn't take no for an answer. Others say I'm also arrogant, opinionated, and a jackass know-it-all that is disliked by most of my coworkers. With all that being said, I'm thinking I might be a good fit for talk radio. Do you have any advice?
Well, no,
That from M. Gates.
I have suggested not necessarily talk radio, but talk TV. That I have already predicted that within a month he will have a show at least on Fox News weekends, perhaps replacing the next Secretary of Defense,
Pete Hegseth.
And then very quickly probably ending up with a regular nighttime gig during the week as well.
Maybe he'll jump on the Tucker Carlson network show.
Oh, yeah. There's always that.
He's got his own gig now,
There's
right?
always that.
All right.
Top 5?
Vikings injury report and the burglaries continuing with National Football League players. It's not good.